we don't exist to be another Montessori school that's just, kind of available to more affluent families. It was part of the original founding of City Garden back in the 1990s to make this model accessible to families across all backgrounds.
You're listening to the Bold by Choice podcast with Vashanta Harris and Jim Gunner. Real talk about charter schools, from the boardroom to the classroom, powered by the National Charter Schools Institute.
Colleagues and friends, welcome back to the Bold by Choice podcast, where we are super excited. This is season 3, and we have been on a road trip, locating and spotlighting schools that we believe are absolutely worth bragging about, and the leaders who boldly reimagine what's possible for students in their communities. Well, I'm your host, Vashanta Harris.
And I'm Jim Gunner. One of the most enduring ideas in education is that children are naturally curious, capable, and full of potential if we design environments that allow them to thrive. Today's episode explores what it looks like to take that belief seriously, not just for some students, but for all.
That's right. And it finds us traveling today to St. Louis, Missouri. And we're going to visit with City Garden Montessori School. Now, this is absolutely a very public school who is actively engaged in chartering. And you all know what we say about chartering, creating something new and different in the spirit of getting stronger results for kids. And we know that City Garden Montessori School's philosophy is really deeply rooted in this process. They are also very intentionally designed to serve students across all sorts of lines of difference, race, class, even geographical neighborhood lines. So we're joined by my new friend and colleague, Christie Huck, City Garden CEO, and one of the school's founding parents. I'm so excited for you all to meet her and to hear more about her journey. I was really excited when Christie and I began to meet and learned that her role in this process really started as a parent, and then we brought her into this education world in different ways and ultimately now in leadership. And one of the things that she and the parents and the founding team were asking themselves was this really cool design question. What kind of school does my child and all the children in our area truly deserve? And today we're going to hear about their journey towards answering that exact question. Christie, we're so glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here with you.
Well, before we dive in, because I'm really pumped and I'm going to get ahead of myself, why don't we take a moment? I would love for our audience to have a moment to get to know who you are. So I want to offer you the opportunity to introduce yourself in your own words.
Again, it's so great to join you today. I love talking about schools. I love talking about Montessori, about charter schools. I did not enter this work as an educator or as a leader. I'm from Ferguson, Missouri. So I've lived in Missouri my entire life, and I went to the University of Missouri Columbia. I studied sociology and English, and I became very fired up about racial and economic justice, social justice issues. And I moved back to St. Louis, and I got involved in community organizing and activism. And then I had my child, who's now about to turn 25. And so then when I was looking at early childhood opportunities for him, I met the founders of City Garden Montessori's preschool, which had started in the mid 1990s as a teeny tiny preschool in an old tavern in St. Louis City. And the goal from the very beginning was to make Montessori education accessible and available to families in the city of St. Louis across backgrounds. So I enrolled Jude, my son, in the preschool, and then fell in love with Montessori and fell in love with this little community of families and teachers and children. And then with some of the other parents who had their children in the preschool, particularly my friend Rain Bayak, started looking at K through 6, K-8 schools together. And so Rain and I did a bunch of school visits and started talking kind of obsessively about what we wanted and felt like our families, our children needed as our kids' journey and Jude approached kindergarten. And long story short, we got very fired up about the state of education in St. Louis. particularly the segregation that still existed and still exists in St. Louis schools. St. Louis is one of the most segregated cities in the United States, and our neighborhoods and our schools reflect that very much.
Mm.
And both of our families wanted a diverse school that would provide an excellent education for our children and also be a place where, they were really known and really nurtured and loved and part of a community. So long story short, we ended up going to the founders of the preschool and asked if they had ever thought about expanding into the elementary years. And over the next couple of years, we met in each other's living rooms and in the nearby park and had potlucks and ended up creating the vision for what became the charter school. So that was in 2006. And then there's a lot more to the story, but we ended up opening the charter in 2008. And that's really how I got involved.
We love moms that love their kids and love education and fall in love with becoming change agents, not just for their kids, but for others' kids. And there's a book called Arate, and it's how you become a hero for two. And what that means is that you become so strong, so dedicated, so purposeful that your strength lifts others up.
Mm.
And that's what I hear in your story. And just take us back, Maria Montessori, St. Louis, Missouri,
Well,
2006, opening in 2008. Why'd you pick Montessori besides falling in love with it in preschool?
yeah, and the reason I fell in love with it is because of everything that the Montessori philosophy and approach embodies. So Maria Montessori was one of the first female physicians in Italy in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. And so she was a scientist, and she really believed that humans are born with inherent brilliance, that people enter the world as tiny, humans, um, as full people with their own wisdom and a path that is uniquely theirs. And so she worked with children in housing tenements in Rome. And she became sort of obsessed with how children learn, how humans develop. And she ended up designing this very elaborate, complex, and really beautiful method that really honors the fact that every human, every child has a unique purpose in the world. And that our jobs as adults is really to prepare the environment and work to do the preparation of our own selves to deeply support children in fulfilling that potential to basically letting that journey unfold. And when we do that when we give children autonomy and independence and a lot of power, frankly, that they take ownership of their development in really powerful ways. So when I first encountered Montessori at City Gardens Preschool, I walked in and I saw these very small children doing very independent, sophisticated things and having these really incredible conversations with each other and engaging with very sort of complex ideas. And so that is really what drew me into Montessori and believing that every child deserves this kind of education. And we saw that in private schools in St. Louis. Rain and I, went to those schools as well and said, that's what we want. That's what all families in St. Louis City deserve. But, we knew we were not able to access that. And most families in St. Louis City are not able to access that. So that's really what drove us to be determined, become determined that that is the kind of school we wanted to create and could create as a charter school in St. Louis.
What I love about that is a number of things. And instead of me kind of sharing what that is, I want to offer an opportunity in this moment for us to take our listeners on an audio tour. If we were walking inside City Garden right now, what are
Mhm.
some of the things that we would hear, we would see, and maybe even smell, right? That the students are engaged in and the teachers are engaged in. So let's kind of like do a little audio tour here for a moment.
Okay. So we'll start in our early childhood building. We have two buildings. One is early childhood and the other is elementary and adolescent. Like I said, a very big part of Montessori is thinking about the prepared environment. So the physical environment, the emotional environment. Maria Montessori really asserted that beauty and order are fundamental human needs. And so when you walk into our early childhood building, it is an old warehouse or factory space that still it actually has cranes hanging from the ceiling in our atrium with these beautiful clear story windows, has some exposed brick. There are these sort of industrial elements that we have left because we are an urban school, but it also is very home like. And so you walk in, there's a lot of natural light. There are people, we talk about something at City Garden we call radical hospitality, which is the idea that every person belongs in this space. We get a lot of comments that when you walk into our buildings, there's just an energy that is both sort of alive and vibrant and also kind of calm and soothing. And throughout both buildings, there's just kind of a hum. There's a hum of energy and there's a hum of noise. You'll hear children's voices and children's laughter. And when you peek into a preschool classroom, you'll see about 20 students and mostly moving about the classroom doing kind of their own thing. So you might see one child who's slicing apples, preparing that for snack for their classmates. You might see another or two children together, maybe getting the laundry basket together to help with doing the laundry for the day. You might see a guide or a teacher on the floor giving a lesson with the sandpaper letters. And then that child, very kind of proudly will go and take that work and put out a work rug and work on that material on their own. So in the classrooms are filled with beautiful hands-on materials that are mostly made of wood and other natural materials. There are beautiful wood shelving. And all of the classrooms are filled with furniture that is the size of those children. There's also a sink and kitchenette, and every classroom has its own bathroom because the idea is that children are able to be as autonomous and independent as possible as early as possible.
So, as a Montessori dad, father of seven, I love Montessori, but I want to highlight a few things that you just said, Christy, and have you take us into them. But that idea of personalized, individualized learning that we talk about now,
Mhm.
that was Maria Montessori,
Yeah.
right? Individual students, human dignity, their own gifts, help them discover them, help them evolve them, unleash their potential. And the hands-on, the natural beauty and the order. And I always said that if you went into a Montessori school, a classroom with an untrained eye, you'd be like, this is kind of chaos.
Mhm.
But if you go in and you actually stop and watch it, it's harmony.
Yeah.
We've highlighted what we call the love of learning. Do you get to go to school or do you got to go to school? The kids at City Garden, do they got to or do they get to?
Oh my gosh, our kids love coming to school. I know last summer, we heard from a parent who reached out right before school started. We sent out kind of the back to school email, and she reached out and she said, we were at the doctor's office the other day, and the nurse asked my son, like, "Oh, are you kind of bummed that school's starting again next week?" And he said, "No, I can't wait to go back to school. I miss it. I miss my friends. I miss the work. I miss my teachers." And I think that is one of the things that is so special about City Garden is that our kids are genuinely happy. Our classrooms are full of joy. It truly is their community. It is their space, and our students get to show up as their full selves. And I think about that oftentimes, as adults, just thinking about if we all had gotten to show up in our schooling experiences as young children, as middle school children, what it would have meant for us. I think about that for myself. Like if I would have been able to felt free to be fully who I am, what a difference that would make, for all of us as we, become adults. And it's true for our children.
I love that. And there's another piece to this puzzle that I have learned over the years with Montessori. Just as you described in our audio tour, all of those things I 100% felt when I had a chance to visit. And there was not a sense of lack of academic rigor. And that's kind of what attracted me. I was like, whoa, this is a whole new way of not only infusing all of those human elements, but kids were working hard and grappling with
Mm.
manipulatives that help them understand concepts. And so
Yes.
one of the things I was thinking about was, wow, how do the adults in the space prepare for this? How do teachers
Mhm.
prepare themselves to serve as a guide and
Mhm.
serve in their classrooms in these communities, and often with a group of students for more than 1 year? So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you all approach preparing your adults.
Yeah. Well, and first, just to say that no one works harder than a Montessori teacher, I would say. Our teachers are incredible, incredible humans. And the reason I say that is because our teachers are essentially individualizing curriculum and lesson planning for every child. It really is, basically that every child has their own individual curriculum plan, work plan, and then that child is getting individual one-on-one lessons and small group lessons with their guide or teacher, and then taking that and working independently to continue to work through the things that are unique to them and their development and what they need. And in order to do that, our teachers go through extremely rigorous training. So, as a charter school, we have to have teachers who are state certified, but we also, as a Montessori school, want to have teachers who are Montessori certified. And so, for our early childhood program, we have a partnership with a training program called Hope Montessori. It's about 30-40 minutes away, and we have sponsored a number of teachers going through that program. It's either a 1 or 2 year program. And then we actually, a few years ago, launched our own elementary Montessori training program because there was not an elementary training program in the St. Louis area. And we tried sending our teachers to other places and other cities. We found that it just was not, it's both hard to travel and have to go away for weeks at a time, but most Montessori training programs have been set up to prepare teachers to implement Montessori in private school settings. And we're a really different entity. We are a public school. We have to, we teach state standards, we do assessments, we teach students across many developmental needs. And so creating our own teacher education program was a really big and important step for us. And it's been very exciting to be able to sponsor and support now many teachers in going through that. But it is essentially the equivalent of getting a master's degree, either doing the early childhood or elementary training program. Yeah, it's extremely rigorous and takes for elementary often 2 to 3 years to complete that program. And one other thing just to say about Montessori is in addition to the prepared environment, there's a major focus on what we talk about as the preparation of this of self, which is really it's a spiritual preparation that the adult does to really examine kind of what do I need to do to make sure that I am showing up fully and as my best self to be able to see every child and what their individual unique needs are, and to remove as many obstacles as possible to that child fulfilling their full potential.
A lot of schools try to do what I'll call classroom management, right?
Mhm.
Manage, control students. Montessori's got a very different philosophy. Most times people associate it with a private boutique type of school, very small. And they look at it and they say, well, you can do that in a small private setting, but you can't
Mhm.
do it in a public school setting. You now have 600 students.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that journey and how did you move this from kind of a private boutique for
Mhm.
middle class and affluent parents to something that's open, free, accessible to all?
Yeah. Thank you. That's been at the heart of our mission. We don't exist to be another Montessori school that's just, kind of available to more affluent families. It was part of the original founding of City Garden back in the 1990s to make this model accessible to families across all backgrounds. And it started with 4 students in an old tavern, a bar, literally, in like 1994, and then was in a little shotgun style teeny house for many years. That's where my children went to preschool and served 10 or 12 students at a time. And then when we decided to open the charter school, we were in the basement of a church and we started the charter with 53 children in K through third grade. And even that, of course, felt like a really big leap going from like 10 or 12 students to 53. And then we added a classroom each year until we got to about 275 students and moved into our building that now houses our early childhood education program. And for many years, it was really lovely, pretty small school and community. And our families, have always been very, very involved. Of course, families were part of the founding of the school. And so we incorporated families into every part of sort of the life of the school. Um, the thing that we were constantly kind of grappling with was we always had way, way more applications than we were able to admit in terms of seats of students. And there continued to be inequitable access to great school options for families in St. Louis City. We knew that it was really important to make sure we got our our footing and our program really well established before we grew more. But in 2018, we did decide to take the leap and to increase access again. And so over the last, so 2019, we bought a building around the corner and began the process of renovating a building that would become our elementary and adolescent education center. And then in 2021, we began to grow again. And so we essentially tripled the number of preschool and kindergarten students that we accept, and then have grown from there into our elementary and adolescent grades. And so we went from 275 to now we're, I think, at 608 students. I will say I feel really, really proud and grateful that we have expanded access to our program to families, more families in St. Louis City. And I'll be really honest, it's been hard. It's been a real kind of, stretch for our community because many families felt really, really connected to this very small, intimate community. And so for some people, this has felt like a loss in some ways because it isn't the teeny tiny school anymore. And we've had to really wrestle with that and think about what it is that we need to do to continue to make sure families feel seen and heard and engaged and part of something that's really special and unique while also serving more families in the city of St. Louis. So, and of course, we grew in the midst of COVID as well, which brought all schools lots and lots of challenges. So it just sort of, kind of heightened probably the experience that we would have had already growing. And I would say things are kind of starting to settle out now. We've done kind of our big tranches of growth, and now we're kind of beginning to stabilize in terms of the numbers of kids. And, of course, it has meant hiring lots of new staff and admitting students at older grade levels, which we had never done before. So there's been a lot of change in a kind of a short period of time. And just, I want to acknowledge that has meant a lot of sort of stretching and challenges for our community. But I also still just kind of hold to the idea that there is so much possibility, and this model of education really is something that's worth doing the work for to make it accessible to more children.
Well, the stretch is where the growth is. I want to ask you another question. Montessori tends not to value state standardized testing. You're a
Mhm.
public charter school. You have to do state assessments. How did you wrestle with that?
Yeah, that is it's an ongoing challenge that we wrestle with, but we really see what we're doing as an opportunity to show that Montessori is a viable model of education for all children. That it is actually possible to implement Montessori fully in a public school setting. And so it does look a bit different than you might see in a very sort of traditional Montessori private school environment, because we are ensuring that we're teaching the state standards and we're making sure that those things are met and that our children can achieve well, candidly, on standardized tests. But that doesn't mean that we're not doing Montessori. We've essentially had to take the Montessori philosophy, pedagogy, curriculum, and take the state standards and make sure that we're aligning. And so the Montessori is the how, it is the method, it's the way we teach and educate children. But the what in terms of state standards is a part of what we have to make sure we are covering. And then, we also have to make sure our students are familiar and fluent in the language that they will encounter on standardized tests, and using the tools and the computer that the tests are administered through. And so those are all additional things that we have to make sure we're incorporating into our program. We really see it, I think it's easy to see that as like a big drag, because it's like one more thing and it doesn't quite align with the philosophy. We actually have chosen to see it really as an opportunity to show that it's possible. And, while we don't always love standardized tests and having to kind of to sit in the data all the time, the thing is that it gives us important information. It does show us some valuable things about what our students are learning and where they are. And so, it's on us then to really leverage that in ways that make sense for our students, to make sure that they are progressing in the ways that will ultimately open up opportunities and make it so that all of our children have all of the choice that they deserve to have as they grow into adulthood.
But Shanta, did you hear that? Great leaders don't see problems, they see opportunities.
That's all right. And weaving it in and not allowing it to distract you from the core values of City Garden Montessori School. There was two things I appreciated out of that, Christy and Jim. Like, that is a profound statement to make. And for the other leaders listening, I just kind of want to echo that. There can often be things that we just have to do because of what state we live in and what laws we are bound by. But they don't have to derail us and distract us from the things that we said are important in our cultures. And the other part I heard you talk about was growth and change. One, are inevitable if we're staying in tune with our customers, right? Our students and their families. And two, there are trade-offs sometimes when we pursue scaling or when we pursue replication or growth. And it's okay to be honest about those and to share those in community. One of the things one of the folks in the chartering space, Harriet Ball, said to us was share everything. And I think sometimes it's okay for us to share the things that were not so fun and we're not so positive, because that's part of the journey too. And we can all learn a lot from each other when we speak about trade-offs and things that may have challenged us.
Yes, absolutely.
So as we head toward the close, my favorite question comes up. I'm super biased about it, but that is, what's one lesson that your students have taught you this school year?
When I think about this school year, there are lots and lots of amazing things that have happened. There are lots of also challenges. Anybody who works in a school knows that there is nonstop sort of excitement, crisis, also excitement. I would say this year, so just to share, this year we have had two families who have lost their mothers. And we have another family who, in which the mom has a terminal illness. What I would say that our students have taught me is that we should never underestimate children and their ability to show up for one another, to be community for each other, and to love profoundly, to love deeply. It has been so powerful to witness how our children have shown up for their classmates in their time of loss. And of course, it's an enormous tragedy when any child loses a parent. Our classrooms, really are communities. Our children are in the same classroom for 3 years with one another and with their teachers. And they do everything together. They learn together, they work together, they take care of their classroom environments and the broader school environment. They resolve conflicts together, and they build community together. And so when one of them is going through something really, really hard, they feel a deep sense of both responsibility, but also care and deep interest and commitment in supporting each other through that. Um, and so I just, yeah, I think that is the thing that is standing out to me right now. That, in the midst of great loss, our children have actually organized and rallied around their classmates and helping figure out what they might need and making sure they have friends to walk to and from school with, or making sure they hear that they are loved and cared about. And our families, of course, have shown up really well for each other too. But that's what's standing out the most is we should never underestimate our children because they they know. They know what is the most important in life, and they will live into that.
Christy, that was so well said, and thank you for sharing that. Vishanta, just to shout out to our audience, there it was again, the secret sauce that everybody wants to know. It's love. And the theme in all of these great schools is they believe in their students, they believe in their human dignity, and they work intentionally to find it and bring it out, help them discover that. And you can call it a lot of things, but I like to call it love. And it is the secret sauce. And you hear it repeatedly from the schools that are getting things done for kids. They believe and trust in their students and they love them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And our hearts and well wishes go out to all of the families that are currently experiencing that loss. And if there's anything we can do to be of support, please do let us know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Jim, we're going to head to the close. Any final reflections for our audience today?
Well, I love Montessori. I love it so much that it's what we picked for our own children. Now, as a charter school dad, our youngest, Natalie, is at Renaissance Public School Academy, which is a project-based school. Everybody's looking for the secret sauce, Vishant, and I just can't say it enough. When you empower students to take ownership and responsibility for their own learning, and you give them that guidance and that structure and that belief and that love, it's great for the adults, it's great for the students. And so all of a sudden we move from, people are excited when school's canceled to, no, they're sad because they love going to school, because they love learning, they love being in their community, they love growing. And that's the magic. That's what we want for all kids. We call that the transformative power of education.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's absolutely right. And Christy, we can't thank you enough. I appreciate you for the time that you've shared with us this week and the gift of your stories and the stories of your students and your community at City Garden Montessori. So thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate what you all are doing here.
Well, thank you. And friends, you know what I say every week. If this episode resonated with you or sat with you in a special way, we encourage you to share it with someone. They can be in education, a parent, a student, or a friend. But share it with someone who believes that the relationships that we have and that we create in our communities are a part of the fabric and the foundation of really great schools. And also that authenticity is a strength. And so we applaud the Montessori schools and City Garden for all that you do to support students and showing up in their authentic selves. But we'll be back same time next week, and we look forward to continuing the journey with you. Until then, stay bold.